Some interesting things have come up in the comments recently. JS commented on episode 70, Relativity and Common Sense. On the Michelson and Morley experiment, he wrote, "It was never, not ever, not once, not in anyone's mind about the Earth moving or not. That interpretation came later by ignorant flat earthers. It was entirely about ether." I could hardly believe that anyone knowing anything about physics could say that. That experiment was specifically designed to measure the speed of the Earth through space. So I googled the Michelson-Morley experiment. The first response was an AI article giving the nonsense that JS had written. The Michelson-Morley experiment was designed to detect the existence of the luminiferous ether, a hypothetical medium thought to permeate space. I've tried out ChatGPT to see what AI is like. I found it to be programmed to give the scientific establishment's current views with no hint that there are other views. But with a bit of careful questioning, I could get very different answers. Then I looked to see what Encyclopaedia Britannica had to say. Michelson-Morley experiment. An attempt to detect the velocity of Earth with respect to the hypothetical luminiferous ether. Thank you, Britannica. You know what you're talking about. I tend to be a bit cautious about Wikipedia, but I had a look. The Michelson-Morley experiment was an attempt to measure the motion of the Earth relative to the luminiferous ether. Well done, Wikipedia. You also got it right. So why would the AI bot, or rather the establishment whose dictates are programmed into the AI bot, want to pretend that the Michelson-Morley experiment was not about finding the speed of the Earth through space? I think Einstein gave the right answer. If the Michelson-Morley experiment had not brought us into serious embarrassment, no one would have regarded the relativity theory as a halfway redemption. It was an embarrassment because the Enlightenment had gleefully dismissed the centrality of the stationary Earth as being certain proof that the Bible was not God-given truth. And why does Einstein say his ether-free relativity is only a halfway redemption? His theory claimed to prove that it was not possible to determine whether anything was moving or stationary. It could not prove that the Earth was moving. Michelson and the physicists of his day all came to the conclusion that if the Earth slips through the ether, as required to explain away all the other experiments which had shown that the Earth does not move relative to the ether, then it follows that if the ether does slip past, the relative velocity is less than 1/6 of the Earth's velocity. And that is the maximum possible, the most probable value provided by all the measurements was effectively 0. Now that was, and still is, as Einstein told us, a serious embarrassment. That the Earth could be stationary at the centre of the universe would be a disaster for the Enlightenment and for the establishment's iron grip on science. So it's not surprising that the establishment is moving to rewrite the history of science again. And this brings to mind a Douglas Jones article in Credenda Agenda. The odd thing is that science has such a ridiculous track record to serve as such a powerful veto house of truth. If we think in terms of centuries and millennia, few other disciplines turn inside out so flippantly and quickly as the natural sciences. Nothing can take the puff out of the scientific chest more than a study of its history. Perhaps that's why it's so rare to find science departments requiring courses in the history of science. The history of science provides great strength to the inductive inference that at any point in its history, that day's science will almost certainly be deemed false, if not laughable, within a century, often much less time. And Jones is of course correct, even if, as far as the establishment goes, he is politically incorrect. So we can't blame JS for believing the politically correct story. It looks as if he was never advised to study the history of science. Not surprising. Michelson-Morley is once again a serious embarrassment, as it was a century ago. As Adolf Baker noted, failure to observe different speeds of light at different times of the year suggested that the Earth must be at rest. It was therefore the preferred frame for measuring absolute motion in space. Giancoli noted, but this implies that the Earth is somehow a preferred object. Only with respect to the Earth would the speed of light be c, as predicted by Maxwell's equations. This is tantamount to assuming that the Earth is the central body of the universe. And Bernard Jaffe noted, the data were almost unbelievable. There was only one other possible conclusion to draw, that the Earth was at rest. This, of course, was preposterous. Lorentz was able to get round this problem with his theory of relativity, based on the ether having certain properties. Michelson and Morley's apparatus must have been compressed and shortened by pressure against the ether headwind, by just the right amount to give a null result. For a time, the scientists accepted Lorentz's ether-filled theory of relativity. It explained many observations. All those observations are now said to prove Einstein's relativity, just as surely as they were then claimed to prove Lorentz's relativity. But when Arthur Eddington claimed to have proved Einstein's general theory of relativity, a totally unfounded claim, as soon pointed out by Charles Lane Poor, and when Kennedy and Thorndike's experiment could not be fitted into a moving Earth, even using Lorentz's relativity, all the physicists accepted Einstein's relativity as the only way to deny a stationary Earth. So Lorentz's relativity faded into the mists of obscurity. And now that Einstein's admission of the necessity for the existence of the ether for his general theory of relativity, and for the existence of standards of any physical theory about reality, are becoming widely known, despite the establishment's attempts to keep it under wraps, together with Einstein's denial of his original claim that the speed of light is always constant for all observers no matter how the observer and the light source are moving, also becoming widely known, there is the huge problem for the establishment that once again they are faced with the evidence that the Earth is stationary at the centre of the universe. And the let out of special relativity is no longer a plausible let out. No wonder they're having to rewrite history to get out of Einstein's serious embarrassment. So thanks, JS, for bringing this up. It's the first time I've come up against this particular rewriting of history. I expect it will become the standard story taught in all our academic establishments. And we had another commenter joining us, Science Demon, who tells us he's a physicist. He also tells us he's an atheist who is absolutely confident there is no evidence for God. But what really struck me is that he's just as misled as JS, and he really seems to believe strange things about scientists. I pointed to Kelvin's unequivocal support of God. The more thoroughly I conduct scientific research, the more I believe that science excludes atheism. Overwhelmingly strong proofs of intelligent design lie all around us. The atheistic idea is so nonsensical that I cannot put it into words. Demon's response? He saw what wasn't there. And that was a very long time ago, when everyone was forced to believe. Let's stop right there. It was just about at the peak of the Enlightenment, when Lyell and his millions of years were well established. Lyell was the king of geology. And Darwin, with his story of evolution, was just as well established as the king of biology. How does that square with everyone was forced to believe? The whole of the establishment was promoting atheism. Kelvin was following the evidence revealed by his science against the grain of the establishment. But let's get back to Science Demon. I, as a physicist, am able, in this era, to access much more information than Kelvin was, by which to draw conclusions. Well, Kelvin proposed the second law of thermodynamics, which says effectively that order never arises by itself. And he pointed out that this wipes out evolution. Science Demon has certainly seen attempt after attempt to find a flaw with the second law. Prigozhin spent years trying, in particular with his attempts to show that it does not hold for systems far from equilibrium. Evolutionists have tried for years to pretend that it does not hold for open systems, simply making fools of themselves in the process. And besides that, the most telling evidence for God is the fact that the cell is an irreducibly complex organisation of highly sophisticated machinery, controlled by the most complex and highly miniaturised data processing system integrated with a vast store of information, which led Karl Popper to point out long ago what makes the origin of life and of the genetic code. A disturbing riddle is this. The genetic code is without any biological function, unless it is translated. That is, unless it leads to the synthesis of the proteins whose structure is laid down by the code. But the machinery by which the cell translates the code consists of at least 50 macromolecular components which are themselves coded in the DNA. Thus, the code cannot be translated except by using certain products of its translation. This constitutes a baffling circle, a really vicious circle, it seems, for any attempt to form a model or theory of the genesis of the genetic code. And I don't think any amount of mathematical fiction will enable any atheist physicists to get around that vicious circle. Oh, the depth of the riches both of the wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out. For who hath known the mind of the Lord, or who hath been his counsellor? For of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom be glory for ever. Amen. Thank you for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe and press the bell so that you'll be notified as I release new movies. If you'd like to support this project, you're welcome to do so through Patreon. Find a link on my channel banner and in the description below.